Right.
So I guess I have a question for you.
Sure.
So in the current ordinance, what it states is that you should ride to as near to the right-hand side of the road as practicable.
Right.
And so in exercising due care.
Right.
I guess I'm not sure exactly because in some of those situations it's not practicable.
That's right. But
So
who decides? But who decides what is practicable, and how is that decision made?
well, I mean, I think that it would be the person who is riding the bicycle who decides what's practical. And within reason. I mean, because what someone thinks is, reasonable or it might be completely unreasonable to 99.9% of the world.
But how would anyone else know that it should that it is the city council's intention that the cyclist should make that judgment?
Well, I think it's implicit. I mean, part of it is implicit. I think.
Okay.
I didn't hear you. What do you think?
Well, I was just saying, in the current ordinance it says that you should ride to as near to the right as you can as practicable. So in certain situations, it's, like if you're approaching an intersection that's narrow and you're going to take a left-hand turn, or you're going to go straight and you want to, you don't need to ride. In that situation, it wouldn't be practicable.
Well, that's true, and that's if there was a legal conflict and it ran its course all the way through to the end, that might be how the final decision was made, right? Is that okay? The cyclist was doing something reasonable, and it was only practical for them to do it. But in the meantime, it causes conflict because, let's say, a police officer doesn't think that's practicable. It also sends a message by putting an additional restriction on cyclists that doesn't apply to other drivers. You're also sending a message that they are second-class travelers on the road. And the question is, if the cyclist is given the freedom to judge what is and isn't practical for them, then what's the purpose of the ordinance?
I think the purpose is to say that in Easthampton, when you can ride as close to the right as you can, you should stay to the right.
Why?
And because I think you're giving truly a bicycle is a vehicle.
Yes.
However, there is a significant difference between a bicycle and a car or a truck, and the consequences. I would much prefer to be in my truck and hit another vehicle head on than be on my bike and hit a truck head on. There's a significant. We're comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
Bikes are very different. I mean, you're riding. My bike's 22 pounds, and I'm not anywhere close to weighing as much as a car.
Right.
So my view, and I think a lot of people's view, is that you have to approach your responsibility a little bit differently when you're sharing the road with 4,000-pound vehicles. And here's another big distinction that was not mentioned, and that is speed. If you cannot maintain, Eli, I don't know how big your legs are over there, but I can tell you my max speed on my bike is 54 miles an hour. I recorded it in Vermont, fully loaded on a touring bike, going down a huge hill. And that was fast.
Yeah, that is very fast.
And I don't know a whole lot of people that have gone 54 miles an hour on a bike, but I guarantee you cannot go 45 miles an hour on a bike down the section of Route 10, which is the business section, which the speed limit is 40 and 45. And if you're in the middle of the road, then I would say the reason why people are probably going to be upset, or the police are going to say that you're obstructing traffic, is because unless you're some sort of freak of nature, you're not going to be able to maintain that speed limit. And if you can't maintain that speed limit, then you should probably move to the right. And I think that's what the intention of the ordinance is.
Well, that may be the intention, but the effect has been some years ago at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, a cyclist was stopped by the police for riding in the center of the lane on Clark Street.
Clark Street.
So the effect,
Are you sure that was the only reason they were stopped?
She was
Yeah.
making a left turn. She was correctly positioned in the center of the lane to make a left turn into her side street, and she was stopped by the Easthampton police because the police felt that she should be all the way over to the right.
Making a left turn.
That she must ride
You
as
know,
far right as possible, were the words used.
Well, what's the
And he,
Well, this is practicable. They
That-
got it wrong.
Absolutely, yeah,
But,
yes, they
so I'm
absolutely
just
did.
curious, what year was that? It was
I don't remember.
I don't remember, it was
Salem.
7, 8, 9 years ago.
I was in Holyoke the day before yesterday, and I come down Craftsville, turn right onto Route 5. And you'll notice there's a bike lane there, but also in the bike lane, there's signs posted by the city of Holyoke, bicyclists keep right.
Huh.
They're right there, and they're brand new signs, so.
Oh, have you been in Holyoke?
I have.
Have you had an altercation?
I have not. No, I've never had any confrontations with the Holyoke police. As you know, I did have one with the Easthampton police.
Yes.
In a case, right? As you know.
And there was that, I feel like it was near Tasty Tot, maybe? Is that?
No, it was.
Where in Easthampton was that? I'm just curious, just, if you don't mind.
I don't
Sure.
mind. So, well, I was confronted. I was coming north into town on Route 10.
So,
That's what I meant. South. Yes.
South.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I was
So from
confronted.
Northampton?
Yeah, from Northampton. I was confronted when I got into the center of town, but apparently it would concern my behavior as I was coming down the hill.
Across the Northampton Street Bridge.
Yeah, like going
up to the
like
road.
you know that there's the residential strip that's
Yeah.
you know
It goes from Tasty Top to the Northampton Street Bridge.
right
And then up to the rotary.
exactly yeah.
Okay.
So and it's the you can argue about what the law says in like technically, but the effect it has is not the same as what its technical implications are.
Well, then I'm also curious. I mean, actually, Nathan, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say,
stopped talking.
I'm looking at it, and I kind of agree that we should be riding as far right as is practicable. Some of the concerns that I saw, even from the animations, was cars crossing the double yellow line. And again, it's my understanding that you're not in a motor vehicle supposed to be crossing the double line for the purposes of passing. But even for safety, when people are doing that, if another car is pulling out and into their lane and you're across the double yellow, and I'm in the vehicle that's driving, my reaction is to cut hard right, which would then definitely hit the bicycle again, versus maybe slowing down and staying in the lane with the bicycle. I mean, I've seen a lot of people passing, even without bicycles, and they cut out into the far left and they just go, and even on the other side, then people are going off onto the side. So to me, it kind of makes sense that if people would slow down and you're staying to the right, that would be the safer thing than having cars push out the road.
But what we're talking about here is a situation where there isn't enough room for safely passing within the lane.
Well, no, that's the practical
They're going-
one. Again.
right, so they're
If
going
there's
down
no
the
curb
cross,
there,
yeah.
clearly you need to be in the lane. But if there's room to be off to the side, I don't see that a bicycle should be.
Yeah.
And the other reason too that you were kind of expressing, Salem, is the speed issue. And while I'm not going to say that a bicycle isn't a vehicle, I acknowledge it is. I have two myself. It's not registered or regulated. It doesn't have the same safety equipment. The one video that you showed with the rear-facing camera, where the bicyclist was occupying the lane, it looked like the bicycle may have been doing 10, 15 miles an hour, and the cars were doing about 40 miles an hour.
Right.
Even with motorcyclists, they have lights, more safety equipment. If they hit the brakes, they've got brake lights. If a bicycle is in the middle of occupying a lane like that, and suddenly hits the brakes with both hands because a squirrel runs out across the street, you're not going to be able to see that. A car isn't going to see that bike that they see at a safe distance up ahead suddenly coming to a halt where then they're going to have to overreact again and probably go to the left into traffic, versus if the bike was over a little more, and I recognize again you'd have less time to react yourself with that squirrel, but there just seems to be a little bit more safety issues involved when we're talking about a vehicle that doesn't have built-in safety equipment, brake lights, turn signals, things like that. It just makes me a little more concerned that an unregistered vehicle would be occupying the center versus staying as far right as practicable. Yeah.
Well,
What about the case of farm equipment?
On
See, farm equipment is covered under the slow vehicle rules.
I've never seen it.
So are bicyclists. And I believe the slow vehicle law, if I remember correctly, and this is motorist law, which I haven't been studying, permits you to cross a solid yellow line to pass an extremely slow-moving vehicle. So the motorists you saw crossing the double yellow line to pass a bicyclist were behaving legally in respect to the slow vehicle law. Now, the question, so as I understand it here, we are in agreement that there are situations in which the lane is simply too narrow to share. And in those circumstances, it's perfectly legitimate for the bicyclist to control the lane.
Yep.
Okay, we're in agreement on that. Good. I understand the safety concerns, but do they permit us to have discriminatory laws?
Yes.
Do they?
I think so. I mean, if you
Okay,
take
I don't think they do, but that's.
I mean, unless you want
that's
to,
the discussion.
unless you want to take this to its logical extreme. If you want a bike to be, the same as a car,
Well,
then you need
no.
to put brake lights
You
on
have
it.
to
you need to have
register,
turn
get your
signals.
insurance and the rest of the stuff,
well,
pass your
except
safety
that,
checks.
see, the reason why a car needs to be registered and the driver needs to be licensed and need to have safety equipment, because a car is inherently more dangerous than a bicycle, right? A car is a very large, heavy, powerful, fast machine, and that's why they need to be regulated that way. A bicycle is not. A bicycle really cannot do that much harm, and that is why.
Right, and I think that you said it perfectly right there. For me, just as an aside, and I think you kind of know this, but I too am, I would say, a fairly experienced cycling instructor. I worked for a company called the Biking Expedition, which was the world's oldest bicycle touring company, and I worked there for 4 years, and I led month-long self-supported bike trips and taught high school students, and I've been teaching high school students since 1993,
Oh, you're old.
cycling safety. And one of the things that, I was called as an expert witness at a trial in Greenfield for a cyclist who had been severely injured. I wasn't able to go, but my boss was able to go. And one of the things that we were very adamant about teaching our students is if it's between you and going head on into a car, it's you.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think, Eli, what you just said about cars being dangerous, and bikes being, fairly innocuous, and because they are lightweight, small, and if you are in the middle of a lane and a car's coming up on you, you don't stand a chance.
But if you're on the side of a lane, the same thing would apply.
Fair enough.
Except
But
that
then
you're
again,
less-
it's
except
all
that-
situational.
Except that you're
It's all
less
situational.
visible.
Maybe.
So that-
I'm still alive.
So
Well,
the idea is
yeah.
that.
I will tell you why
And-
you're still alive. The same reason I'm still alive. Who in this room has hit a bicyclist with their car?
Yeah, it's not super common.
As I tell my students, motorists are actually very good at not hitting what's in front of them.
Yeah, especially well, not when they're texting though.
Well,
And so,
I realize
and so
that.
that's why one of the concerns I have is I don't want to just say carte blanche, take the lane every time you want, because I feel like that is counterintuitive to safety. And I say, when I ride my bike, I make myself as small a target as possible. And my mom, actually, I got my love of cycling from my mom. She rode to Amherst for 37 years on Route 9. Every single day, there was over 42 degrees. And she never took the lane. And she was fine. And I would say she You could be attest to, cycling safety. She had a couple close calls, but she was always a conscientious rider, and I think that's the key. If you're a conscientious rider, whether you are taking a lane or whether you're using a shoulder, or you're going to protect yourself. And I think that, I know, because I've seen it, if a car is going to make a decision between crossing a double yellow line into traffic, or if they don't have time to slow down, you're done.
Well, that's why you want to make it so that they can make that decision as early as possible. You want them to see you from far off.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why. That's why.
But if you're going 12 miles an hour in a 45 mile an hour speed limit zone, they're probably going 55.
Mhm.
And that, whether and if they're got their kids crying in the back seat, they're reaching for a seat.
That's why I go with the visibility issue again. It's just one of those things of, if you're talking a John Deere tractor or a yellow piece of equipment in the middle of the lane with an orange safety triangle on it, chances are I'm going to see it. But
The simple answer to that is, the state passes a law, all bicyclists will wear safety yellow or safety fluorescent red like a hunter, or that safety green.
So
Because the motorcyclists come up by me the other day, they were leaving for North Carolina, and he had that new safety green, and boy, does he stand out. I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I'd like to make another point about what happens when drivers are not paying attention. So when drivers are not paying attention, well, first of all, when a driver is paying attention, they tend to mostly focus on what's in front of them, but they also tend to look all around, so they're aware, they have some awareness of what's going all around them. A driver who is not paying attention will tend to get kind of tunnel vision, focus only on what's right in front of them. And if they have their eyes on something else, they'll tend to look up every now and then to make sure they maintain course. But they're going to be looking straight ahead. They're not going to be looking off to the side to see if there's something there at the edge that they don't notice.
And I would say that they're probably going to be looking for the lines to stay between them. And if they're looking on a right-hand justification, they're going to see.
No,
you.
I don't think they are. I think Eli's right. They're just looking straight ahead.
I
would
contest that.
I will say this. Okay, let's take that white line. This may be getting off track. I don't think it is. Let's say that fog line. Even if there's a shoulder there, if there's not a car actively passing me, I will be on the left of that fog line. I won't be out in the center of the lane, but I will be in that right part of the lane, because my experience has been that if I'm on the other side of the fog line, the motorist doesn't see me. Now, if you bicycle, you ride a motorcycle, you drive a car, you're probably looking for that motorcyclist and that bicyclist. I know I've been training myself to do that. But the average motorist, the way I judge this, the reason I say what I say is, the car that is coming up behind me while I'm in the lane, and then I move out of the lane. That car gives me a wide berth. If I'm riding outside that fog line, the motorists are just coming right. I'm getting buzzed all the time. It's just as if they never even saw me. He's not in my lane. It doesn't matter. I never saw him. So I will ride. I think you commented on this when we were on a class, that I would ride in the lane, and now because there was enough shoulder, I would ride in the lane till the car got close, and then I would move over, and then I would move back again. That's what I choose to do.
What I think has been missing in this whole presentation, from the viewpoint of the bicyclists, that they don't have it right now with the presentation we had. I could be exactly wrong with this, but I don't think they're showing enough consideration to the other motor vehicles on the road too. I think that's one of the factors that when we do some legislation or some changes on this, we have to make sure. You notice that there's very little consideration between automobiles on the road. If you people on a bicycle, you're moving target to a car, So you have to show more consideration than the person behind the vehicle. I mean, he can slam on his brakes, you got power brakes. You know, those little brakes you got on a bicycle, if you're moving, you don't know if they're gonna work or not.
So, I mean,
I assure you, mine do.
Yeah.
And
I had
can-
two departure brakes.
I can stop from 15 miles an hour in just over one bicycle lane.
yeah, so I would also say a
But
bicycle
anyway,
is not a charge.
let's not get off on that.
Yeah, I was saying-
Might I propose wording differently then? If you want to keep the ordinance essentially as it is.
I'd be interested to hear what you said. I mean, because there is, maybe before you do that,
Okay.
so the state law,
The state law doesn't address this at all.
well, it actually does, and it's 89 4B. Upon all ways, the driver of vehicle shall drive in the lane nearest to the right side of the way when such lane is available for travel, except when
Right.
overtaking another vehicle or when preparing for a left turn.
Right. But in the right lane, not
Yeah.
as far right as practicable.
It's
But,
yeah.
yeah, and so, and then,
Okay.
I think it's section 89(2), except when overtaking and passing on the right is permitted, the driver of an overtaking vehicle shall give way to the right on favor of the overtaking vehicle on visible signal and shall not increase the speed of his vehicle until completely passed by the overtaking
Where
vehicle.
are we here?
This is chapter 89, section 2.
Okay. If
It's not
possible that-
within this. I mean, this is a different. I actually got this out of
Oh, okay,
chapter
okay,
89,
okay.
section 2. I don't think it is.
Okay, it's not quoted. Okay, so say that again then.
So, except when overtaking and passing on the right is permitted. Except when overtaking and passing on the right is permitted. So that would be on a highway.
No, that,
or,
a bicycle may pass on the right at any time. as
Right,
full
but
as
this
it
is the motor vehicle.
Oh, okay.
This is the
motor.
laws.
Okay, the motor.
Which is what.
Yeah.
No, I believe that section applies to all.
Okay. All vehicles.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but this applies to all
Okay.
vehicles.
So one example, for
Well,
instance,
Hold on.
I want to hear it.
So, and what I was saying is that it probably, like Route 91, you can pass on the right if.
Yes.
So, except when overtaking and passing on the right is permitted, the driver of an overtaken vehicle shall give way to the right on favor of the overtaken vehicle on visible signal and shall not increase the speed of his vehicle until completely passed by the overtaken vehicle.
Okay. Okay.
So, I mean, within, to me, I guess it's interpretation, but to me, I kind of interpret those two sections together as saying what we said.
Okay. Okay. So
Another concern with this too is it goes back to the beginning of the presentation where you're talking about the regulations should be uniform over large areas and the same for all or compatible. I'd be hesitant to open this up for more interpretation that a bicycle could take the lane whenever they wanted to, because if you have somebody coming in from out of town or from another area or another part of the state or another state for that matter, again, it's the safety of the bicyclist that they're not expecting somebody to be in the middle of a 45-mile-an-hour lane when there's a 10-foot curb. And they may be distracted getting that cup of coffee, changing the radio, but it's just that whole thing of what are people statewide, nationwide kind of expecting. And, well, just because they're in Easthampton, and the regulations are changed, and we would put in that a bicyclist could take the lane whenever they wanted to. It's just not probably safe or practical behavior.
we're not proposing that you necessarily put it in, but be in compliance with state law, which does not require you to be as far right.
I don't think that.
And like I said, I feel like that section, along with section 89 4B and along with section 89 2, that the spirit of the state law is saying if you're being overtaken, you should go to the right.
Okay. I remember I said I had a couple possible
Yes.
rewordings. One is if you're intent on keeping it essentially what it is now, I would dearly love to get rid of practicable and say as far right as is safe. Or if you want to go to a different wording, go to the wording that is used when we say you have to facilitate overtaking. In other words, back to Eli's slide of move right to allow someone to pass, when this and this and this and this. But in other words, don't tell me because someone is behind me on Cottage Street that you expect me to move far right.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
I would propose something along the lines of bicyclists can be, or may be required, are required to facilitate overtaking when it's feasible, safe, possible, whatever. I would say when it's safe to do so. Safe for both the cyclist and the overtaking vehicle.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know how Eli feels about this. It's actually his project. I'm butting in here,
Well, I mean,
but I'm trying.
Well, I would say that I mean, first of all, so there are a number of factors to facilitating overtaking. First of all, it has to be possible to overtake safely in
Right.
some position, right? So, if you're on Cottage Street, for example, then you're facilitating overtaking no matter what you do because there is no overtaking on Cottage Street.
Well, I mean, Cottage Street is
It's an
good.
extreme example.
It's an extreme. But I mean, again,
Right.
what we're talking about is the flow of traffic. On Cottage Street, the flow of traffic doesn't exceed 25 miles an hour because
Right.
it's too narrow.
Right.
So a bike fits in perfectly,
Yeah.
and it makes sense to take the lane within that section because you're within the flow of traffic.
And
I mean, I think my biggest concern is taking the lane without necessity. If you're not, if there's nothing forcing you to take the lane in a section of road that has the speed limit which exceeds the limits of the bike. And I mean, we're talking about, even on a good day, like I ride my bike to work pretty much every day, and my average speed's around 18.5 miles an hour. And
That's good.
I push it a little bit. So, if I'm pushing it and I'm going 8, and my average speed's 18, I mean, sometimes I'm up to 24, 25, but that precludes a lot of roads to be able to stay with the flow of traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my
But
thought.
so there are on most roads, it generally is not necessary to control the lane most of the time. But again, it's something that depends. It depends on the situation, and part of the situation is what's going on inside the cyclist.
So what if the cyclist is a nutcase?
For example, the cyclist could be.
I mean, seriously.
So, for example, the cyclist could be making a left turn. The cyclist could be avoiding, could be trying to avoid a damaged part of the road.
Sure. I mean, that's those are all good reasons that you might need to get in. But what if, but here's another thing. What if the cyclist just wants to? Is that a good reason?
Well,
I mean, what I'm saying is, just because they feel like I am a vehicle, I want to take the lane, so I'm going to take the lane. Is that a good reason to take the lane?
I would say, number one, I'd say that I have never heard of that happening. And I would also say that I would say that probably, no, they probably shouldn't do that, but I can't imagine any reasonable way to enforce a law that would tell them not to.
Yeah. Which is why I like the practicality of saying that the bicyclist must facilitate overtaking by faster vehicles when it's safe to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Because that way we can say, then the question, okay, number one, you have to have had vehicles trying to overtake before the police would have any reason to intervene.
Right. I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
And then you can still have the discussion maybe after the fact of why did you not feel that it was safe? But too often practicable becomes possible in the eyes of policemen and other people, judges and everybody else. So I don't like the word.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to look at that word, and I'm willing to go through this and tighten it up. And maybe what we can do is, for next time, I'll take a stab at fixing this. And I appreciate Eli. I appreciate the fact that you're bringing this to us and that we're going through this. And you know, just because we don't disagree doesn't mean that I hold any animosity. But
Likewise.
you know, I think that my ultimate goal from chair's perspective is to craft an ordinance that is truly going to be in the benefit of all citizens of Easthampton. It's going to preserve life and quality of life within Easthampton, and that is the best fit. And so that, you know, that's what I'm going to try to do. And I think you know, when we come back, I think next time when we meet next time, I think what I'll try to do is I'll try to pull all this together into I'll use your existing, or I'll try to figure out a way to do it, bringing in all the feedback that we've gotten, and then, you know, we'll show it to you guys. We'll talk about it, and, you know, the process is we'll take a look, decide what we think, if there's any other changes we want to make, and we'll vote on it. Then it'll go to the full council. The full council still has to vote on it.
Right.
So, and they don't necessarily know.
And we can argue with them at their meeting.
Exactly. And so, just for time's sake, if we could just kind of, I know Casey's been here, we have another item on the agenda, so.
Two other things quickly. But,
Feel free.
Number one, your point about wanting you not to have to deal with different laws each place you go. That's the case we make for being in compliance with state law. So, I mean, if we in this city try to have different ordinances in the state, then we're creating exactly that problem.
Right, but I don't see that the state is saying that you can take the lane whenever you want.
No, but the state is also not saying in any way that I can see that you may not take the lane. Which brings me back to, like I said, the second thing I wanted to say was the ordinance has to be enforceable.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
But, I mean, whatever we come up with has to be something that if the policeman writes me a citation, that citation can be enforced if legitimate.
That's
definitely.
And that's where you could run into problems with state, or
Right.
not agreeing with state law.
Yeah, and actually, the first point I made about the expectations we have for traffic regulations was that it should be clear and unambiguous. And so I would like whatever we come up with to not be too subject to interpretation.
You know, that's why you said safe, and at first changing the language practicable to safe, and I was putting that in there, and it's like, well, that seems like a reasonable consideration. But then the question is, how ambiguous is the word safe?
But the thing is all right. So here's the deal. You know, because I've done this for a while, and I've worked with Bruce a lot, and he will tell you. And actually, I got in trouble for this because I was like, you know, we need to. It was when we were talking about public drinking, and I didn't want to get arrested in case I had to chase my dog and I had beer in my hand, right? And so police officers are in a position where they are constantly making judgment calls.
Oh, absolutely.
They're constantly interpreting the law. They are, and I know this because they told me until they were blue in the face. They are going to, a lot of the law is subject to their interpretation, and the way that they enforce it is subject to, you know, their perspective. They might choose to, like, for example, they pull you over if you're driving your bike or a car, and they choose to give you a warning. Well, this a different cop could pull you over for doing the exact same thing and choose to give you a ticket. So there's interpretation and everything. So, I mean, I think part of this is, and I wish that we had a police officer or someone here to speak to this.
But see, in this case, we're asking them to interpret a law that they don't have, that they in general don't have the training to interpret.
They might disagree, but I don't know if I would disagree. I mean, I think that they probably don't get a lot of bike safety training, but I think that I would say that they're pretty diligent about understanding the rules of the road and traffic rules. So I think that's something that I'll check in. I'll send another email to Bruce and see if we can get somebody in here to talk. Maybe you can. I know that I watched those videos that you had sent me a link to. It seems like there's another crew in Florida somewhere that's kind of doing a similar concurrent thing.
Yeah. Well. So I got this material from the Cycling Savvy program, which started in Orlando, but
Orlando,
it's spread to a number of other
Right.
states.
And it's, I did notice that they had run a training for local police.
Yes, and I would actually be very happy about seeing more bicycle law enforcement training.
Okay. So, that's something we can look at, and I think, we'll take, I think we'll plan on doing it the same cycle that we've been doing, if that's okay with you guys, if that works with you guys. And so, we'll work on it next time. And, by the way,
My wife asked me to make sure that
yes,
we got that.
we did, I don't know if you guys saw this, but it's,
I don't believe they did.
the Manhan Rail Trail met Monday night.
No,
And they said, they actually came up with wording for us, which is great, because I really like the wording. And it says, any use of motorized vehicle, including snow or recreational vehicles, prohibited on the city-owned Manhattan Rail Trail with the following exceptions: vehicle uses mobility aids, such as electric wheelchairs, for persons with disabilities, electric-assisted bicycles, public safety and emergency vehicles, and official vehicles used for trail maintenance. Problem solved.
no, on the question I have though is electric-assisted bicycles.
Yes. So that was I think it was 2 meetings ago. You weren't here. A gentleman came in who one of his relatives had just bought. It's called an e-bike, and it's a pedal bike. It's a bike.
Okay.
It's got a small electric motor on it, and
Right.
and he has a heart condition. So when he is exhausted from pedaling, he presses a button and it takes over for him for a short period of time.
But that would just be for
So you
people with
got that safety
disabilities?
agreement.
I mean, it would be an e-bike.
See,
So
Yeah,
it's
I like that. That's a Christmas tree
motor
out
on
there,
it.
too.
It does not have speed like.
It was
Yeah,
Well,
going
maybe a
right-
moped, but certainly not a motor scooter.
Yeah.
Sure.
it's-
Okay.
it's
I mean,
hard.
I've seen bicycles with electric
Yes.
motors on them before,
Yeah.
but I'm just,
Doesn't go super fast.
Yeah.
well, what's super fast?
Well, I mean,
Well, there's
I don't
no-
know if it's
there's-
unreasonable compared to I can go
Yeah.
25 from a standstill on my bike.
Yeah.
So.